They belonged to Cork County. And then what a thing it must have been to come into a wilderness where there wasn't a school nor a blessed thing and try to raise a family.
This land has supported generations of our family since it was purchased on November 11th, 1837, first as a woodlot and then as a family farm. It was purchased originally by Peter and Mary Montgomery, parents of Elizabeth Montgomery, who is the great-great-grandmother of the current occupant and descendant and owner, Cora Hayward. Elizabeth Montgomery, or known as Betty, married Tom Gorman. They were the first to actually live and raise a family here. The history of the ownership, with more details, is contained in the book Dolan Desmond Family, A History. The barn, as it is seen today, was renovated in 1915-1916. It was a modern marvel in its time, with an elaborate and effective ventilation system, running water, electricity, all of the modern marvels, which of course were added to over time. Frank and Lourdes Connell did some mixed farming on a small scale, but eventually the farm evolved into a country home, with the barn primarily used for storage and the surrounding lands left to go fallow, with the exception of vegetable gardens. The hay was sold off the field to others who would come and harvest it. Gone were the days of all hands on deck to get the hay in before the weather changed. Frank and Lourdes Connell installed a pool in 1984. The chicken house was now renovated into a pool house. This area was part of the new structure built by Ellen and Frank Dolan and was originally a summer kitchen as well as a working area to separate milk and cream. It is still fondly known as the back kitchen. Still part of the newer structure, the home now has a front and back staircase. The room to the left was the new bedroom or master bedroom for Frank and Ellen Dolan, with a special window put in so that he could see the barn. When the Connells grew up in the house, this room was known as Louise's room, as she stayed in it when she came home to visit. We are now in the original Gorman structure. The house has 6 bedrooms upstairs that has hosted, beginning with the Gormans, 5 generations and 40 children, plus most extended family members of those who lived here at some point. Currently, Cora and Rick's grandchildren, a 6th generation of our family, visit for extended stays regularly, if these walls could talk. Now we will hear some reflections on what it was like to grow up in this home and live in Nowlanville, from Louise Dolan Werschuk, Betty Dolan Clancy, Keith Connell, and Sarah Hayward Krause.
But down here in the barn now, this was the real play toy down here. Once we got all the hay in, that was a lot of work bringing the hay in, but once we got it in, we'd make tunnels all through it, which we weren't allowed to do. We weren't allowed to play in the hay at all, but we did it. And we'd set up kind of camps on each side of the mow here, one over there and one behind me. And then if we had relatives here visiting, we'd all go up and get crab apples, make teams, and we'd have a great big crab apple fight on each side. And it was just ideal for knocking someone's eye out or something like that, but it never happened. But it was great fun. And until the grown-ups heard us, and we usually had these big crab apple fights when Leonard's kids were up here, and the Lynches were up here, McCarthy's were here, Clancy's were here. So we had lots of fun, lots of people in the barn. So Leonard, he used to come down, he'd let the big hoop out of him. They went out one at a time. He'd be standing there, and we knew if we went out one at a time what we were going to get, so we'd say, no, not doing that. So we'd go out down through the horse barn. There was a ladder down there, a bunch in this mow. They could go out the other door over there behind us. But one day, David Lynch and me, and I heard it was John McCarthy, went down through the little hole in the pig shed there. Halfway down, David fell, and I fell on top of him, and John McCarthy fell on top of me. And poor David, he caught it. He landed across the boarded fence there we had for the pigs, and he tore all the cartridge in his ribs and ran home like that. So then, of course, Alice called and wanted to know what was going on. And we blamed Donald Leonard. It's his fault. We were scared to go up by him. Anyway, we used to have great fun with the crab apple fights and stuff, and all the cousins would be here, so you can imagine what was going on with 20 young lads, all between the age of 10 and 15 or 8 and 15.
I was very, very happy with my family there in that house, and I knew I was blessed, and I was grateful for that. I remember everything about the whole house. The woodshed was always full of wood. It was a huge job. My father went to we owned a lot of woodland, and my father with the boys would chop down the trees, saw the wood, and get it and bring it home. So before we went to bed at night, they would stoke the kitchen stove with wood, but that wouldn't last during the night. And we'd wake up in the morning cold. This was before we had a furnace. Now later years we had a furnace. But in the early years, that big house was cold a lot of the time. And not during the day, but at night. You would wake up in the morning, the house would be cold. And my father was always up early and would light a fire in the kitchen stove. And the whole house wouldn't be warm, but the kitchen would get warm, and we'd all rush there to warm up. But we had lots of blankets and quilts and that kind of thing. My early memories are of a pump in the kitchen, where when we wanted water, we pumped it. If you wanted it hot, you put it on the stove and heated it up. But I wasn't very old. I wish I could remember the exact time. But we got a bathroom eventually, and then we had running water throughout the whole place. And I'll never forget what a luxury it seemed to be. And when we always had a bathtub upstairs, but if we wanted a bath, we had to heat the water on the kitchen stove, carry it upstairs and dump it into the bathtub, and that's how we got a bath. Can you imagine? And we didn't get a bath often. Remember about the barn, two things very vividly. Having to go twice a day and milk cows. Everybody there had 2 cows that they had to milk every morning and every night. And then we had to, when we got the milk, there were 2 options. Either the dairy was taking the milk, in which case that was the end of it, or if the dairy was telling us that they had enough milk and we had to keep it, then we would have to run the cream separator and then sell them the cream. And that was another big thing, because once we used the cream separator, it was an apparatus that had to be washed immediately and get ready for the next time it was needed. There was endless work on the farm. We never stopped. If you spilled a drop of milk, you got hell. Because we sold the milk at the creamery, and it better all be there to make money for it. My dad would get an order for potatoes, and we all had to go, because we had to pick the potatoes in the fall. We had a big field full of potatoes, and it was a huge job just to pick those potatoes. We would put them into a cart, a horse-drawn cart, fill the cart, and my father then would take the cart and dump it into a slide and put them all into the basement. We called it the cellar. And so we had a cellar full of potatoes. So then my father would get an order for potatoes, depending on what it was. And we would have to fill as many bags as we needed to fill the order. And we did. And we all went to school. So we'd go down at night and pick enough potatoes to fill the order that my father would take it the next day and deliver it.
Well, didn't he say something like, come on, put a few more potatoes in there, don't cheat the man?
Don't cheat the man. He was very conscientious about that. He did not want to cheat anybody.
He erred on the side of giving too much, not too little.
Yes, he wanted to be sure that he gave the man what he paid for.
Yeah.
They were very conscientious about that.
And I want to go back to when you went to school, because I know from my mother-in-law that you just didn't walk to school. You had quite a ways to go to school. Can you tell me about what you had to do when you get from Nowlanville to Chatham?
We went on the train.
So there was a train that went from Nowlanville?
You know, it's not the times that you are living in now. Before I went to high school, I had a milk cows.
Yes, okay.
I often
So your
wonder,
day started by milking cows.
getting the farm work done.
What time did you get up?
Oh, we must have got up good and early because the train went. It took us. If we ran to the train, it took us 20 minutes, and we did run every day.
And the train brought you home.
And the train took us. Well, it was 2 miles away, way out in Nelson.
So you had to go 2 miles to get to the train.
Yeah, we ran 2 miles in the morning to go, and we ran 2 miles to get home. We didn't walk. It was cold. And there was bears on the road, which you magnified in your mind that they were coming at you.
What about winter? It must have been a challenge then.
Oh yeah, it was real cold every day, and storms and snow,
And you always had to run to get to
we
the
always ran.
Wow.
I guess maybe because we were late for the train was on schedule,
Yes.
and we ran to get to it. But I had 2 brothers and 1 sister going when I went, so there was 4 from the house running.
By the time we had moved here, the pool had been installed. So in the summer, that's where I spent most of my time. Doreen and Bernadette would come by with their kids, and we'd have a lot of pool parties in the pool. Dorothy would come by with the grandkids, and we'd all spend time in the pool. Same with Alice. Like Alice and Lindsay would come up, and we'd swim. Betty'd come up with her grandkids, and we'd swim. I spent a lot of time in the pool swimming with various second cousins. Which is mostly how I got to know them. Like Sarah Legier, I pretty much got to know her through swimming in the pool, and now she's my best friend, so it worked out to live here and have the pool. I always remember them telling the story about when they were down in the barn, and they were supposed to be feeding the pigs, and one of the pigs was pregnant, and their dad was always very careful around the pregnant pigs because they would sell the piglets once they were born. I can't remember if it was Grandma or Betty, but one of them swung a board out, and the pig jumped and hit her head, and they knocked the pig out. And I remember them both telling that story and always having a good laugh because it was a funny story for them, and I remember them worrying about how their dad would react. And I think they told him shortly before he passed away because he didn't know about it at the time, and I remember Grandma saying that he thought it was awfully funny when they told him. She said that she didn't think he'd find it funny in the moment, but enough time had passed that it was quite funny. Grandma told me a lot of stories about her great-grandfather Pa, and she'd reminisce about sitting on his knee as a child and him speaking Gaelic to her, and she'd repeat a lot of the Gaelic phrases that he would say. She always called me her pet shillelagh, and she said that came from Pa. He would call people his pet shillelagh. Church was very important overall for Grandma and all of her siblings. When we were at church, we'd always sit with Dorothy and Vince and Doreen and Bernadette and their whole clan. We all sat together. And Dorothy always encouraged you to have faith. Sarah Legier, Dorothy's granddaughter, and I taught religion class together, and Dorothy would always give us tips on what we should be teaching and what we were doing wrong, because a lot of times we weren't teaching religion class the way Dorothy taught religion class.
Yeah, it was always lots of fun, but as we got older, in the teenage years, when we were hitchhiking out, and we'd always say, what the hell did they move back here for? Why didn't we live in town where we didn't have to hitchhike and walk everywhere we went? Well, that was just us thinking then, but actually it was a good place to grow up.